Winter's agreement. The December air felt brittle as Aditi Sharma adjusted her crimson dupatta. 28 years of life hadn't prepared her for this moment. Sitting across from a stranger who would become her husband in less than a month, her mother's gentle nudge prompted her to lift her gaze from the untouched tea. Vikram has his own architecture firm, her father announced proudly, as if reading from a resume. Top of his class at Delhi University? Vikram Malhotra, 32, nodded politely. His beard was neatly trimmed, his eyes intelligent but guarded. Aditi noticed how he barely looked at her, instead focusing on her parents with practiced respect. And our Aditi teaches classical literature at Miranda House, her mother added. She's published several papers on contemporary interpretations of ancient texts. The conversation flowed like a rehearsed play around them while they remained silent. Participants. Afterward, they were granted 15 minutes alone on the veranda, a modern concession to an ancient tradition. I should be honest, Vikram said once they were seated. His voice was deeper than she expected. I'm doing this for my grandmother. She raised me after my parents died and her health is failing. This is her final wish. Aditi appreciated his directness. My situation is similar. My father's heart condition, the doctors say another year, maybe 2. This would bring him peace. Then we understand each other. He offered a small diplomatic smile. I don't expect love, but I can promise respect and independence. You'll maintain your career, your friendships, we'll be partners in the practical sense. That sounds ... reasonable. The word felt cold on her tongue. They married 3 weeks. Later, in a lavish ceremony, neither particularly wanted, Aditi's father beamed with joy throughout, making the elaborate charade worthwhile. Vikram's grandmother blessed them with trembling hands and tears of satisfaction. Their new home, Vikram's spacious apartment in South Delhi, became a study in careful navigation. He worked late most evenings. She prepared lectures in the spare bedroom she'd converted to an office. They established routines that minimized overlap. Breakfast at different times, dinner often eaten separately. Polite notes replaced conversation. We'll be late tonight, or left food in the fridge. One evening, a month into their arrangement, Aditi found Vikram examining a framed photograph in her office. Your family? He asked, gesturing to the image of a younger Aditi with an elderly woman beside a lake. My grandmother. She taught literature before me. Aditi took the frame gently. She died while I was in university. Sorry, he said, and for once, his eyes met hers directly. She would have hated this arrangement, Aditi admitted before she could stop herself. Vikram's expression shifted slightly. My grandfather would have to. He believed in love matches, despite being in an arranged marriage himself. He paused. But they grew to love each other eventually. That was a different generation, Aditi replied. They didn't have choices. We do, but we've chosen ... this. The unspoken question hung between them. Had they made the right choice? Later that night, Aditi heard Vikram's grandmother coughing during her visit. She prepared hot ginger tea without being asked. When she entered the guest room, the elderly woman gripped her hand with surprising strength. He needs someone, she whispered. He builds beautiful homes for others, but lives like a ghost in his own. Aditi nodded noncommittally, but as she closed the door, she caught Vikram watching her from the hallway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Spring's awakening march brought unexpected warmth to Delhi. The jacaranda trees erupting in purple blossoms outside their apartment complex. 3 months into their marriage, Aditi and Vikram had perfected their choreographed existence. Moved around each other with practiced precision. Their interactions limited to practical matters and occasional polite inquiries about each other's day. That morning, Aditi found a package on the kitchen counter with a note in Vikram's neat handwriting. Saw this at the bookstore. Thought of your lecture series. Inside was a rare first edition of Kalidas's works with scholarly annotations. Exactly what she needed for her upcoming research. She texted a simple thank you and received an equally brief you're welcome in return. Still, something about the thoughtfulness lingered with her throughout her lectures that day. That evening, she returned home to find Vikram hunched over his drafting table, frustration evident in the tense line of his shoulders. Architectural plans were scattered around him, crumpled papers testifying to repeated failures. "Bad day?" she asked, surprising herself by initiating conversation. He looked up, momentarily startled by her presence. The Meta Project. The Foundation. Analysis came back with problems. The whole design needs reworking before tomorrow's presentation. Aditi hesitated at the threshold of his workspace. In their unspoken agreement, this room was his territory, just as her office was hers. Crossing that boundary felt significant. "Have you eaten?" she asked. "No time," he muttered, already refocused on the plans. An hour later, she returned with a tray of simple food, roti, dal, and vegetables. She placed it silently beside him and turned to leave. "Wait," Vikram called. Would you? Mind looking at something?" Aditi approached cautiously. He gestured to the plans. "I need fresh eyes. The building needs to incorporate elements of traditional Rajasthani architecture while meeting modern, environmental standards. But something's not working." Aditi studied the drawings. Literature was her expertise, not architecture, but she recognized the influences he was trying to balance. "It reminds me of the historical contradictions in Tagore's work," she said thoughtfully. He balanced traditional Bengali aesthetics with Western literary influences by finding the philosophical common ground between them. Vikram looked at her. "With new interest?" "Go on." "Both traditions value harmony with nature, just expressed differently. Maybe instead of trying to blend the aesthetics, focus on that shared principle." She watched as something shifted in his expression. He turned back to the plans with renewed energy, making quick adjustments while she stood awkwardly, uncertain if she should leave. "Stay," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "Tell me if this makes sense." They worked until midnight, their conversation flowing more naturally than it ever had. Aditi found herself describing the architectural metaphors in classical literature, while Vikram sketched, incorporating her insights in unexpected ways. When the final design took shape, Vikram looked at her with genuine warmth. "This is brilliant, thank you." "I barely did anything," she demurred. "You did more than you know." His phone chimed with a message, breaking the moment. "My grandmother's caregiver. She's having a difficult night." Aditi saw the worry crease his forehead. "You should go to her. I can clean up here." The next evening, Vikram returned home with a small cake. The Metas approved the design. He called it innovative and thoughtful. "That's wonderful," Aditi smiled. "It's our success," he corrected her, cutting 2 slices. For the first time, they ate together at their dining table. Their conversation tentative, but real. 2 weeks later, Aditi's department hosted a poetry reading. She'd mentioned it in passing, never expecting Vikram to attend. Yet as she introduced the guest poet, she spotted him slipping into the back row, looking slightly out of place among the literature students but attentive. Afterward, as they walked home through the spring evening, he surprised her by quoting a line from the reading. "You were listening," she said, unable to hide her surprise. "I always listen to you," he replied simply, then added, "I'm just not always good at showing it." That night, Aditi changed the framed photo in her office, placing it with one that included Vikram's grandmother alongside her father at their wedding, the 2 people who had brought them together. As she placed it on her desk, she wondered if arrangements could sometimes lead to something genuine, something unexpected. Outside, the spring breeze carried jacaranda petals across their balcony, a few finding their way inside through the window. She'd left open a small, unplanned intrusion into their carefully ordered space. Summer's revelation, the July heat pressed against Delhi like a physical weight. Air conditioners hummed constantly, struggling against temperatures that regularly climbed above 40 degrees. Inside their apartment, something else was warming. 2. The careful distance between Aditi and Vikram had begun to shrink, though neither acknowledged it directly. They'd fallen into new patterns. Coffee together before work, dinner shared at least 3 times a week, weekend trips to visit Vikram's grandmother, whose health continued to decline. Aditi found herself genuinely enjoying these visits, charmed by the old woman's sharp wit and the stories she told of Vikram's childhood. "He built forts everywhere," she told Aditi one afternoon, while Vikram was speaking with the doctor. "Not just with blocks, with books, pillows, even my kitchen pots. Always creating spaces." Her eyes twinkled. He built walls too, around his heart, after his parents died. You're good for him. I see those walls coming down. Aditi didn't know how to respond. Were the walls truly coming down, or were they simply becoming better roommates? That question haunted her as she graded final papers in her office. Her phone rang, Vikram's number flashing on the screen. Edie. His voice sounded strange, tight with emotion. It's your father. Your mother just called. He's in the hospital. The world tilted. What happened? Another heart attack. More severe, I'm coming to get you. Everything afterward blurred. The taxi ride to the airport, the flight to Jaipur, Vikram's steady presence beside her as they rushed to the hospital. She barely registered his hand on her back, guiding her through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and fear. Her mother sat, alone outside the ICU, looking smaller than Aditi had ever seen her. They're still working on him, she said, rising to embrace her daughter. Hours passed in the waiting room. Vikram disappeared briefly, returning with tea and food that Aditi couldn't eat. When her mother finally dozed off from exhaustion, he gently covered her with his jacket. You don't have to stay, Aditi whispered. Yes, I do, he replied, his voice leaving no room for argument. After midnight, the doctor emerged with cautious optimism. He's stabilized. The next 24 hours are critical, but he's fighting. They were allowed brief visits, seeing her father, the man whose laughter filled rooms connected to machines. The skin ashen broke something in Aditi, she maintained. Composure until they stepped out, then crumpled against the wall in the corridor. Without hesitation, Vikram pulled her against his chest, his arms encircling her completely. She sobbed into his shirt, all pretense abandoned. He said nothing, just held her, one hand stroking her hair with surprising tenderness. Later, he insisted she take the small cot in her father's room, while he and her mother found chairs in the waiting area. Aditi protested, but exhaustion won. In the dim light of the hospital room, with the rhythmic beeping of monitors as soundtrack, she finally surrendered to sleep. She woke disoriented at dawn to find Vikram sitting beside her father's bed, speaking softly to him, despite his unconscious state. Taking good care of her, sir. I promise you that. She's extraordinary, brilliant, and kind. I didn't expect. Double quotes. He paused, noticing she was awake. The nurse said, that's a good sign. For the next 3 days, they established a rotation, ensuring someone was always with her father. Vikram handled everything, dealing with doctors, arranging accommodations near the hospital, even contacting Aditi's department to arrange emergency leave. He did it all quietly, efficiently, without being asked. On the 4th day, her father opened his eyes. His first coherent words were to Vikram, "You're still here. Where else would I be?" Vikram replied. That evening, with her father stable and sleeping, they walked to a small garden outside the hospital. The summer heat had broken temporarily, a rare rain shower leaving everything smelling fresh. Thank you, Eddie, he said the words, inadequate for what she felt. I couldn't have managed this alone. Vikram looked at her intently. You wouldn't have had to. I'm your husband. Because of an arrangement, she reminded him. Is that still all this is to you? His question hung. Between them, weighted with unspoken emotions. Before she could answer, her phone rang with a call from her mother. They were needed back inside. 2 weeks later, with her father recovering steadily, they returned to Delhi. The apartment felt different somehow, smaller, more intimate. That night as they unpacked, Vikram handed her a small package. This while you were with your father yesterday? Explained. Inside was a beautiful wooden bookmark inlaid with an image of the hospital garden where they'd talked. I noticed your book got damaged when we rushed to the airport, he said. I thought you might need a new marker. Aditi ran her fingers over the polished wood, recognizing that this was more than a bookmark. It was an acknowledgement of something, changing between them, something neither had anticipated when they'd made their practical arrangement in winter. Vikram, she began, uncertain how to express the confusion in her heart. Get some rest, he said gently. We have time to figure things out. That night, for the first time, the door between their rooms remained slightly ajar. Part 4. Autumn's Confession. September painted Delhi in softer hues. the harsh summer retreating as festival season approached. The air carried the scent of marigolds in anticipation. For Aditi and Vikram, the changing season mirrored their evolving relationship, warmer, more colorful, but still undefined. They no longer needed excuses to spend time together. Weekend mornings meant lazy breakfast on their balcony, discussing books and buildings with equal enthusiasm. Evenings often found them walking through neighborhood parks, their hands occasionally brushing but never quite holding. My department is hosting a Diwali cultural event, a DIT mentioned one evening as they prepared dinner together. Another new habit: there's a formal dinner afterward. Would you like to come? Vikram looked up from chopping vegetables. As your colleague, or as your husband? The question carried weight beyond its simple words. In 8 months of marriage, they had rarely appeared together professionally. Their worlds had remained largely separate by unspoken agreement. As ... both, I suppose, she answered carefully. He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. I'd like that. The night of the event, Aditi found herself unusually nervous as she dressed in a midnight blue silk sari with silver embroidery. When she emerged from her room, Vikram stood waiting in a matching navy kurta. The appreciation in his eyes made her cheeks warm. You look beautiful, he said simply. At the university, Aditi felt a surprising pride introducing Vikram to her colleagues. He engaged thoughtfully with the literature professors, asking insightful questions about their research. During the cultural performances, he leaned close to share observations, his breath warm against her ear. For the first time, they felt like a real couple. Professor Joshi, Aditi's mentor, cornered them during dinner.
Oh.
So refreshing to see a modern arranged marriage working beautifully, she commented. How did you know you were right for each other? Aditi froze, uncertain how to answer. But Vikram stepped in smoothly. Sometimes the right path finds you, even when you're looking elsewhere, he said. Aditi has taught me that. Later, walking home under stars, partially hidden by city lights, Aditi gathered her courage. Did you mean what you said to Professor Joshi? Vikram stopped walking. Yes. He took a deep breath. Aditi, I think we should talk about what's happening between us. Before he could continue, his phone rang, his grandmother's caregiver. The conversation was brief, but concerning. We need to go to the hospital, he said, already flagging down a taxi. The night unfolded in eerie parallel to her father's hospitalization. Different patient, same sterile corridors and anxious waiting. This time it was Aditi, providing steady support as Vikram faced the possibility of losing his last family member in the quiet hospital room. Watching Vikram hold his grandmother's frail hand, Aditi realized something important, somewhere between obligation and understanding. She had fallen in love with her husband. The realization terrified her. Dawn brought better news. The crisis had passed, though the doctors warned it was a sign of accelerating decline. As they prepared to leave, his grandmother beckoned Aditi closer. He looks at you the way my husband looked at me, she whispered. Not at first, but eventually, when it mattered. At home, exhaustion overcame them both. They slept through most of the day, waking as evening shadows stretched across their apartment. Aditi made tea, finding Vikram on the balcony, his expression troubled. What are you thinking? She asked, handing him a steaming cup. About time, he answered. How little we might have of it. My grandmother, your father, ... He looked at her directly. The moment felt pivotal. Aditi set down her cup. Before your grandmother's call last night, you wanted to talk about what's happening between us? She prompted gently. Vikram nodded slowly. I've been thinking about our arrangement. How it's become ... something else. Something else, she repeated. Heart racing. She interrupted. Before you continue, there's something I should tell you. The words tumbled out before she could reconsider. 2 years ago, I was engaged. What a professor I met at a conference. Everyone thought we were perfect together. Same interests, same goals. I thought I loved him. Vikram listened intently as she continued. A month before the wedding, I discovered he'd been involved with someone else the entire time, when confronted. He said he'd never promised fidelity, just intellectual compatibility. She smiled bitterly. That's why I agreed to our arrangement. because emotions seemed unreliable, even dangerous. Understanding dawned in Vikram's eyes. Now I'm afraid, she admitted. Because what I feel for you is stronger than what I felt then, and that terrifies me. The confession hung between them. Vikram moved closer, taking her hands in his. I have fears too, he said quietly. After my parents died, I decided emotional attachments were too risky. My work became everything, concrete, predictable, controllable. He squeezed her hands. Then you helped me with the meta project, and something shifted. During your father's hospitalization, I realized I wasn't there out of obligation. Why were you there? She whispered. Because the thought of you suffering alone was unbearable. His voice grew softer. It's because somewhere between winter and summer, I fell in love with my wife. The words hung in the autumn air between them. Aditi felt tears gathering before she could respond. Vikram's phone rang again, the hospital calling them back urgently. They rushed out together, the confession lingering. Incomplete, the future uncertain as fallen leaves scattered beneath their hurried steps. Full circle winter returned to Delhi, completing the cycle of seasons since their arranged union began. 1 year since they had sat across from each other as strangers, speaking of practical arrangements and respectful distance. Now, as December, frost crystallized on window panes. Aditi placed white chrysanthemums beside the photograph of Vikram's grandmother, who had passed away peacefully 3 weeks earlier. The funeral had been small but dignified, just as the elegant woman would have wanted. Throughout those difficult days, Aditi and Vikram had moved in perfect synchronization. Supporting each other without need for words, they hadn't spoken directly about their interrupted confession from that autumn evening. The grandmother's decline and eventual passing had consumed their attention, grief temporarily displacing their personal revelations. But something had shifted nonetheless, a certainty in their interactions, a comfort in their closeness that hadn't existed before. Vikram entered their living room, his hair still damp from his shower. Ready? He asked gently. Aditi nodded. Today marked another milestone, her father's final checkup, 1 year after his heart attack. The doctors were optimistic about his recovery, but anxiety still fluttered in her chest. The hospital corridors no longer seemed so ominous. Her father greeted them with a robustness that brought tears to Aditi's eyes. He embraced Vikram with genuine affection before the doctor called him for tests, leaving them in the waiting area. He looks well, Vikram observed, taking the seat beside her. Thanks to you, Aditi replied. If you hadn't been so quick that day, ... Vikram shook his head. You give me too much credit. You don't take enough. She hesitated, then added. My mother says he talks about you constantly. His son, not son-in-law? Something flickered in Vikram's eyes. Pleasure, perhaps, or relief. They sat in comfortable silence until Aditi spoke again. Do you remember what today is? Thursday? He answered, then understanding dawned. 1 year since we met. 1 year since our arrangement, she confirmed. Everything's different now, isn't it? Before he could answer, her father returned with a broad smile and clean bill of health. They celebrated over lunch at his favorite restaurant, the conversation flowing easily among the three of them. As they prepared to leave, her father pulled Vikram aside for a private word. Aditi watched them from a distance, the two most important men in her life. Heads bent together in serious conversation. On the train ride back to Delhi, Vikram seemed preoccupied. When they reached their apartment, he asked Aditi to wait before turning on the lights. I want to show you something, he said, guiding her through the darkened space to the balcony. Outside, the winter air carried a crisp chill, but Aditi gasped at the transformation. Tiny lights twinkled everywhere, woven through potted plants, and hanging from above, in the center stood a small table with 2 cups of steaming tea and a single marigold, the same flowers from their wedding. What is this? 1 year ago, we agreed to a marriage without expectations, Vikram began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. We promised respect and independence, but not love, not connection. He took her hands, his touch warm against the winter cold. But something impossible happened. Aditi, something neither of us planned for. He smiled softly. I started noticing everything about you, how you adjust your glasses when you're deep in thought, how you leave notes in the margins of books, how your voice changes when you talk about literature you love. Adity's heart raced as he continued. Your father was ill. I realized how deeply I cared. When you helped with my work, I saw how perfectly our minds connect. When my grandmother was dying, your strength became mine. His voice wavered slightly. That night before we were interrupted, I was trying to tell you that I'd fallen in love. With you, not because of our arrangement, but despite it. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Your father gave me his blessing today for what I'm about to ask. Inside the box wasn't a traditional ring, but a delicate gold key. This is symbolic, Vikram explained. Last week, I bought land near Jaipur, close to your parents. I've designed a home there for us, for visits, for maybe family someday. But only if you want that too. He took a deep breath. Aditi Sharma, we married because of duty. Would you stay married to me because of love? Tears spilled down Aditi's cheeks as everything she'd held back rushed forward. When my ex-fiancé betrayed me, I thought I'd never trust love again. I chose our arrangement because it felt safe. She touched his face gently. But loving you doesn't feel safe at all. It feels exhilarating and terrifying, and absolutely right. Is that a yes? He asked, his voice barely audible. In answer, she closed the distance between them. Their first kiss was tentative, then certain, like their journey from strangers to lovers. Later that evening, they sat together on their balcony beneath the winter stars, her head resting on his shoulder as they looked through the architectural plans for their new home. The design incorporated elements meaningful to both of them, a library lined with windows for her, open spaces that flowed naturally for him, gardens reminiscent of the hospital courtyard where they'd first acknowledged their changing feelings. It's perfect, she murmured, studying the details. It's just a beginning, Vikram replied, pressing a kiss to her temple, as midnight approached, marking exactly 1 year since their first meeting. Addie thought about the cycle they'd completed, from winter's pragmatic agreement through spring's tentative connection, summer's revelations, autumn's vulnerability, and now winter again. Transformed by the warmth they'd created together, their marriage had begun with signatures on legal documents. It would continue with something far more binding, a love chosen freely, with full awareness of each other's strengths and flaws, fears and dreams. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, rare in Delhi, magical in their timing. Aditi and Vikram watched them together, no longer two parallel lives but one shared journey. Finding in their arranged beginning and ending, neither could have arranged or imagined.